Welcome back. Now, over the last week or so, newly elected governors have been hitting the ground running and cleaning up house. What's spurring their early interventions? We'll unpack what their administrations could look like in the next few years. Plus, with a rather eventful election cycle somewhat behind us, some interesting trends stuck out from a record number of female governors, young faces, virtually unknown individuals coming into office. What did this say about how Kenyans voted and the kind of leaders that they want? Well, joining me in studio now are Kevin Osido, the County Governance Watch Executive Director. Thank you so much for coming in. Thanks. And Karen Mwangi, CEO and founder of Intel Research Solutions. Let me begin with you, Karen. When you look at this wave of governors literally taking matters into their own hands, surprise visits to county offices, we know they make many pledges on the campaign trail, so this is not a new thing, but what do you think is spurring this new energy that we're seeing from the newly elected governors?
I think they've been motivated by the fact that Kenyans, you see, when Kenyans were voting, there's something they're trying to communicate, because so many governors went home. Those were trying also to defend their seats. A majority of them did not actually get those seats. And we have newcomers this time round. And I think what they're trying not to show Kenyans, we are ready to work. But in some of them, we have around 7 who are making the comeback. They were there 2013. So what are they trying to tell us? That the pending bill since 2013, they were waiting for them to come and clear. So, but we're hoping that they're going to work. And honestly, I'm so proud of Simba Arati, because I think he started the pace and showed other governors this is what we're supposed to do. So let's hope for the best. Let's give them a benefit of doubt.
You know, Kevin, you've been following the counties and their progression literally since devolution. And a lot of the issues they're dealing with are not new. The pending bills, the Goes to Workers, county expenditure, they've been existing.
Sure.
From your view, what is really ailing the counties now during this election cycle?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Vicky. And the biggest thing that is ailing the counties is a failed transition. A proper transition as was initially envisioned. Remember that when we were moving from the local governance framework to devolved governments, we had a team in place which was called the Transition Authority. So the Transition Authority literally went to all the local governments, the 164 plus. And why they were going to the local governments was for them to be able to determine the degree of ownership in terms of assets and also the human resource perspective. And so one of the things that we failed to do as a country was to slowly get into devolution. So we looked at 2010 as we promulgated our constitution, and within the constitution we had the chapter 11, which basically talks about devolution, and then we had the 2013 election. So people were of course expectant that once we have the first governments, the governments need to pick up and run. But we didn't see even the then government of President Mwangi deliberately putting effort in terms of providing a sink, a proper platform or footing for the Transition Authority to be able to get into governments. Remember that at that point in time, we also had governors, this clamor around flags being called His Excellency. So we were much more engrossed into unnecessary conversations as opposed to the necessary aspects of governance. So over 9 to 12 years, those very necessary elements of governance are coming back to bite us. And one of those is actually the pending bills, because we failed to look at how much did local governments owe the national government, and what did we need to do then to be able to ensure that those the transitionary issues are actually dealt with. Much of the issues around ghost workers that we see today are at 3 levels. The first level is a failure of national government to absorb its own workers back to national government. So you have people who retired or who were facing a retirement age, but there was no proper conversation in terms of how are they going to retire? Are we going to pay them? Are we going to? So most of them, as we speak, Victoria, are on short-term contracts. 3 months, 6 months, they elapse and they keep getting absorbed. The second level are people who were promised jobs by governors in 2013. And so you have an uncle or a boyfriend or a girlfriend who is suddenly elected a governor, and he or she tells you, I will make you a chief officer, I will make you a director.
So political appointments also.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember that once this thing is done in writing, black and white, it becomes very, very difficult for you to fire someone. So even governors who are in 2022 talking about the issues around human resource aspects are going to face. Some of them might get sued, and we have seen individuals actually suing county governments.
Yeah.
Then the third tranche is actually the people who are now supposed to be employed by county governments.
Okay.
So they are employing, and we are seeing adverts on the newspapers of counties requesting or rather asking people to apply for jobs. But the question is, where will they be absorbed? Where will they sit? What driver will drive who? So there are many issues that I believe that had we taken a little bit of time to be able to spend that particular opportunity to deal with the transition aspects, we would not be suffering what we are suffering, including even pending bills.
Yeah.
Some of these people are people who are supplying local governments, but there was no proper mechanisms in terms of how their bills were going to be paid, and those that were owed by the former local governments and moving into the new devolved system of government, which also border into issues around discrimination, or what I would call biases in terms of giving tenders and who gets tendered by county governments, because that also has a huge contribution in terms of the pending bills that we see today.
Absolutely. Karen, when you look at how the EACC has come in on this issue and essentially saying, put your money where your mouth is. So if you do have evidence, bring it over so we can take legal action, but be measured, because aggrieved staff could come back and fight and say, I'm taking you to court. So that there needs to be a balance in how governors handle this issue.
First, I want to differ with my friend here. You know what has contributed to this huge wage bill and pending bills and ghost workers? I think it's because of corruption. There's a lot of corruption in the county government, and it's evident. And actually, you see now, like, for example, the previous regime, it's evident. If right now the new regime, they're trying to clear the pending bills, and even we can see clearly we have ghost workers still in the list of employees, So I think we're supposed to have the former, or rather the previous regime, accountable, because I believe this budget for each and everything within the county. And that is why we even don't have medicines in the county government. We have 14 devolved functions in the county. So you realize we have bad roads simply because of corruption. So these pending bills, I can tell you for sure, it's because of corruption, not because there are people who are promised jobs. Do we give people jobs by merit, or just want to reward people simply because they campaigned for you? That is where we are failing as a government. And EACC, they are really failing us because they have evidence. They're the people who are supposed to investigate these cases. And they have evidence in papers, in the office of the procurement. They do audits. What are they doing about it? So I think it has been contributed highly because of corruption. And those people, they're supposed to be responsible. Let people stop misusing public funds, honestly. We really need people ambao wanajibika, if I put it that in Swahili.
Let's shift gears slightly. You're absolutely right, to how Kenyans voted this time around. We saw in several counties, if it was Kitui and Kajiado, majority of MCAs literally voted out. Kenyans saying we want some fresh leadership who will actually do the job. What do you make of what Kenyans are saying through the ballot, Kevin?
Yeah, of course, for 2022, Kenyans are much more mature.
Yeah.
Citizens and voters are much more informed. They are extremely involved and widely engaged in terms of the governance of their issues, decision-making processes because of public participation. And so when they realize that a leader who is in office has failed to meet certain expectations and to deliver on certain bare minimums, particularly on issues which they promised them, then when that moment of voting comes, then you automatically lock them out. And I believe that that is purely what Kenyans were able to do. And there are very, very many different indicators and trends that we see in terms of even the interest of voters towards various political parties, we've seen a mix of, it's no longer about the zoning, like say Kajiado is probably ODM or Azimio, or this area is Kenya Kwanza and all that. Kenyans were able to clearly identify the characteristics of the leaders they wanted, and they picked them very clearly. And I think for me that really speaks very loudly around the maturity, the degree of involvement and even investment that Kenyans, and particularly the citizens whose interest is service delivery at the county levels, are now beginning to put in to the voting, because voting is a sacrifice, and it's waking up early in the morning, foregoing certain hours of your sleep and standing there for hours. There must be a reason as to why an individual wants to do that. And so for me, looking at the trends, and indeed being there in a number of polling stations in a number of counties when Kenyans were voting, one of the things that they clearly said was, we want fresh blood. And so that fresh blood is probably one of the reasons why, even for the governors, they also feel really obliged and pushed to deliver, because Kenyans are no longer interested in the kind of negative ethnic-oriented politics that Kenyans are used to. And so even looking forward to 2027, we see, in my view, a trend that is being set by Kenyans, in the sense that we want to talk about issues. And 2022 was largely an economic conversation narrative when it came to the campaigns. But again, you look at what exactly does that narrative really got to do with the interests of the citizen. They're looking for people who will come and say, you have a track record in your performance. Maybe you've dealt with water issues, economic issues, agricultural issues, the issues that really affect the common citizen. And I think that really played a very vital role in terms of looking at how they were able to kick out even some very big, old, well-moneyed names.
Right.
And people like Toto now, at a very young age got into Bunge. Compared to 2013 and 2017, now we have 7 female governors,
right,
an upage of five of them, which I think to me also speaks something, in the sense that Kenyans are also interested in experimenting male, female, gender leadership, and then how we can be able to see the performance as opposed to males and females, and who really will be able to do very well.
No, certainly, and Karen, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, actually, just wanted to echo what my friend is saying here. I think also Kenyans are trying to send a very strong message to the government that we are tired of imposed leadership. We want to vote for our own. Yeah. Something else, we are tired of dynasty. We are tired of the same thing over and over again. We are tired of leaders who are not performing. Yeah. So I think that's strongly what Kenyans were trying to communicate when they were voting.
Do you think that dynamic plays out differently between local races and, say, like the national presidential races?
I think that is around now the national, because at the county level, people are still voting along ethnicity, and I think from that perspective, from the national level, and I'm so proud of Kenyans this time round, because we have new faces and newcomers. And we have 7 female governors right now as we speak.
Right.
So I think we've grown, the Kenyans, a majority of Kenyans, let me put a majority of Kenyans right now, we are not voting along tribal and ethnicity line. We are past that as Kenyans.
I want to speak to something that Kevin mentioned. Kenyans were much more intentional in how they voted this election cycle. But one interesting thing that happened simultaneously was the low voter turnout, right? And you're wondering, what exactly does that have to do with this election cycle? We know it's a trend because it's been gradually decreasing over the years. Yeah. But this time, what do you think informed that? And I mean, you run a research company. Have you talked to Kenyans? What are they saying?
Yes. There was actually, when we were doing the opinion polls, there's one question we were asking. Are you likely to vote in the coming general election? And a majority of people, actually, those who mentioned, we are not going to vote at all. So we were probing further and wanted to understand, why is it that you don't want to vote? And one of the reasons that was coming out strongly is a majority of Kenyans, they had lost confidence with IEBC, considering the past 2 elections, honestly, it was really messy. So a majority of Kenyans lost confidence. They didn't have confidence that IEBC, they're going to deliver credible results to them. And this narrative of my vote counts, most Kenyans, especially those they've voted in the past, they've realized does not count anymore because I gave my vote, but at the end of the day, it's being dictated by the state that this is what we want, you know. So again, also something else that contributed to the low voter turnout is because this election cycle, it came in at a time where the country is going through significant economic crisis. You understand? So most Kenyans were concerned with the high cost of living, fuel. You know, can you imagine right now, ugali, it's how much? And you know, it was the cheapest. You know, so when they're going there, they'd be like, am I going to vote or I'm going to look for money to feed my children? Something else, most people, they vote from the rural areas. They didn't have transport to take them to the rural areas to vote. I actually even, personally, I didn't have fuel to drive to my rural area.
So a logistical issue also there, yeah.
That's the thing, you see. So, and again also, you see now even this election cycle came in at a time where we have a huge debt as a country, forcing the government to impose taxation on us, even the basic commodities. Imagine them taxing food because of corruption. Again, another thing that contributed this, younger generation, they did not turn out to register as voters. 2021 October, mass registration was launched. I think up to 2022 January. And the IBC were targeting, it was extended up to January. And you realize they were targeting 4.5 million young voters. But at the end of the day, it's only 12% of 4.5 million. So a majority of young people, they did not vote. Even when we were doing opinion polls, you realize undecided, the older generation, it was way too high. And again, those people, they didn't turn out to vote is people between the age of 18 and 26 because they did not register as voters. So those are the key factors that contributed to low voter turnout. Another thing, Vicky, before you move to my friend here.
Actually, we're running out of time. So
Mount Kenya, you realize most Mount Kenya regions, they come out in large numbers to vote. But this time, it was around 60%. You know, because they were sick. Mount Kenya region, they were saying we were failed by the government. So I don't think we want to vote this time. And again, also, we don't have our own. You see, that was also another factor, especially from Mount Kenya region. They did have their own. Exactly. Yeah, that also contributed.
So Kevin, let me finish up with you. We have just a minute to go. But in terms of lessons that can be learned from this election cycle, Karen talked about Kenyans feeling disillusioned because they feel elections are predetermined. And does my vote actually count? So moving forward, what needs to happen?
If you look at the statistics, and because of time, maybe I will not go over that, but given the total number of registered voters at 22.8, and then you look at the 64.5 that IEBC gave to us, which is about 14 million, gives us a difference of about 8 million. And this 8 million looks like is really the younger generation. So one of the things that we have to do is to be innovative, to make the election exciting to the youthful or the younger generation. And one of the things that we can do is purely to get digital. Why must I be very present at a polling station, queuing and haggling with people around there and there? Why can't it be like an M-Pesa? I pick my phone and at the comfort of my home, we don't have to close schools. We don't have to move and deal with the logistical issues. Sit and say, my president, Victoria Rubadiri, yes. My senator, Karen Mwangi, yes. My women rep, Kevin Osido, go. And I'm done, so there are lessons that Kenya can learn, and that will be able to excite the younger generation, even as we also look at opportunities to deal with certain challenges, including some difficult questions that were asked at the Supreme Court in terms of tallying, counting, and all that. Digitally speaking, M-Pesa, you send it and you have the trust that the people seated at the back end are not interfering with your 40,000 to reduce it to 12,000, and then you have to go asking, where is the 22,000? The trust issue. Number two is, of course, the fact that elections must mean something to people. So like you rightfully said, people are like, okay, the vote has already been decided, my vote will not count. Service delivery, service delivery, service delivery. Kenyans must be able to be convinced that the people that they have given the opportunity to lead them are actually there to be able to meet the expectations of the people. Otherwise, 5 years down the line, I'm even much more scared about the kind of voter turnout that we are going to have in 2027, God giving us life. Because if the current crop of leaders don't do well. They don't perform with the kind of excitement, the high octane politics that we saw in the campaigns, the kind of narrative that really came so strongly to be able to more or less tend to divide Kenyans and then ultimately bring them back together.
Yeah.
If we cannot see something at the end of that very dark tunnel, then I'm so scared about 2027. And that's really based on how those who are in office are going to perform as they, of course, get sworn in. The MCAs are going to be sworn in very, very soon.
Yeah.
The kind of laws that they also pass at the Parliament, National Assembly and the Senate, and also at the County Assembly level must be laws that are only not meant to, suit the whims of the governor and the MCAs to be able to do whatever they want to. But they have to be legislations that respond to the needs of the people. If the issue is water, and you have a feeling that you need a water policy to effect the budget and even, so that you increase resources at the budget, then do it for the sake of the people. If it is about, bursary for young people and the minorities in the community, effect it so that, so the long and short of it, in my view, is service delivery and the expectations that are going to be met by the elected leaders. That will help people get back to owning their governments and sustaining them.
And that remains to be seen in the next 5 years. Kevin, Karen, thank you so much. That's all the time that we have. Keep the conversation going on social media. Hashtag Citizen Weekend, hashtag Kenya's Choice 2022. We take a short break. Sports news coming up next.